Let's talk about how to get you in the news. Let's talk about how to make you the news so that you've got free publicity. You have better than paid advertising. How do you get that done? I'll talk a little bit more about what to do when you land it in this episode so that you actually want to. Because here's a limiting belief that a lot of fitness and health coaches have, and that is I actually don't know if I want to get an interview in the local TV station or radio for that matter, simply because I'm afraid I might fumble. And listen, I can tell you, nobody says that out loud. But if that is something that sits with you and it feels like, oh, yeah, that's me. Like, I'd rather be behind the scenes. I love working with my clients one on one, but I don't know that I am like an out in front, want to be on stage trainer or coach. Totally get it. You're not alone. A lot of actors, a lot of public speakers are introverts themselves. So it's a matter of overcoming it by putting yourself more in the position of when you're there giving that interview, thinking that you're talking to one person, and most likely you are, your interviewee. But if you imagine what you're saying is helping him or her, it will change the game for you. So, we're not going to go into how to get confidence, but this will literally help you because you will understand things that you may need to polish or think about and the details of what makes a great interview. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Fitness Marketing Mastery, where I help with marketing and sales strategies that are easy, enjoyable, even fun so that you can create both a business and a life that you love. Because let's face it, the freedom that you create from making the money or the revenue and keeping it, by the way, that you want is really what we all desire. I don't know that any trainer or coach just wants to be filthy rich as much as they want to live out every day playing out their passion, doing what they love, going to a job that they enjoy and knowing that they're helping people. But we also want some freedom and flexibility, not to work coast to coast, meaning early to late and weekends and missing out on a lot of family things. I remember as a single parent when I was not only teaching some fitness classes, seeing some clients of my own, but I began to manage a program, which meant, an instructor didn't show up and I was sitting on the bench watching my probably then 7 or 8 year old son play basketball and it was my week. I was the parent and then getting a call that no one was coming to teach a class at 5:30. And my answer was pretty short and quick. It's like, well then, nobody's going to be coming cuz I'm not leaving. And that's where I drew my line in the sand and realized that if it came push to shove like this, he was always going to win. Me, as a parent, was always going to win. So I totally understand it. And that has played out many, many times over 38 years for me. But sometimes I made the decision and it was about work instead of being home for dinner with the family. So I want you to have something better and different than I've experienced. And I've gotten better about drawing my own boundaries. And so this is the way to help you get more exposure so that you can create more clients, more customers, however you serve them. This is one of the easiest ways to get you in front of more people with the opportunity to attract the right people who want to work with you and you love working with. So let's dive into this. This is 11 ways to create more hype, more talk, get more media, more podcasts, and more press. But when you get it, We want to make sure you have a great interview, one where you're comfortable, one where people walk away saying something you said over and over. All right. So if you want more media, you want more podcasts, and you want to know how to give a great interview, yes, get and then give. In order to stand out and to get your message out to more people and want to make the most out of every conversation. That's you and me both. When you land a minute on the news or the newspaper calls to interview you for an article, you want to make the most of it. So let's get started. Number one, you want to start with an introduction that intrigues. And this is doesn't matter if I were hosting you on a podcast. You need to give me something that I can read and it's ready to go. So you never write, I blah, blah, blah. This is what I did. This is what happened to me. You write it in third person as if you were talking about someone else. So you want to start and make it news. So I love to put several adjectives, things that describe you or accomplishments in one sentence. So I might, for instance, say wellness coach and best-selling author Deborah Atkinson. So I've already listed a couple of things ahead of my name, and then you go on to say, has done X, Y, and Z in her career. And you want to do the same. So you're really stacking every word in just a few sentences. So a great introduction, maybe 3 to 5 sentences at most, but they're not those run on sentences. They just punctuate what it is you do, who you do it for, and how uniquely you do it. If you have a message that is controversial. It's not with the norm. That I would make sure you drop in your introduction. For instance, one of the things that I make sure is always there are titles to my book because they're a little tongue in cheek. They're fun, but they totally get the message across. You still got it, girl. Hot, not bothered. And I always end with she's a TEDx speaker. The title of her talk, everything women in menopause learned about exercise may be a lie. Now they're sitting on the end of their seats, at least if they're a woman in menopause or they're trainers, they're health coaches that serve them. So, what is it that you do? And listen, nobody wants to hear about your personal life, your personal fluff. You can tell a story when you have the mic, but you want to make sure it's interesting to them somehow. It may make you feel like them so that they can understand, okay, this person's a little bit like me and I can aspire to what it is she's done or is doing. But most of all, you want to really make it interesting. Like, why should they listen to you? So work on something more than how many pets you have if they're not interesting. Now, if you have a chimpanzee, put it in there for sure. But otherwise, you want to make sure you're not just talking about lives in Chicago with her 3 kids, her husband, and her 2 dogs. Because tell me why you'd want to use any real estate up on that. Because somebody is easily and quickly going to tune out. It sounds too generic. All right. Number two, share 3 takeaways. If you are interviewed, you want to make sure that you're telling your interviewee, listen, I know who listens or who watches your podcast, your episode, your news, and I know what they want. And here's what I'm going to share with your listeners how to avoid falls in the winter by improving your balance, how to get stronger, how to, whatever it is that you're talking about. So I tell you this because it's January. I tell you that probably because in Iowa, I'm an Iowa girl. Even though I'm in Scottsdale, I still think about my colleagues, my friends and how I could help them get on the news and get press. So if you're living in a northern climate, that's you. People are worried about falling, they're worried about slipping on the ice. So, what would be the way that you can help them with three takeaways? Whatever it is your topic is. When you're doing something seasonal, let's say it is going to be Heart Health Month, it's going to be Valentine's Day. So you might be focused on how to make your workout more heart healthy. And you don't just say, I'm going to share three takeaways on that. You actually give bullets of this is what they are, because that allows your interviewer to ask you a question about it as you go through. You want to remember, I'm doing a monologue, right? And I'm doing all the talking. But in an interview, ideally, you don't just want to start and answer a question and then do a run on of the entire time. Let your interviewer actually inject a question. All right. Make sure, however, you are not there just to talk about your book or your program, but to give tips and actionable items. If they never take any one step further with you, that they have benefited by spending whatever 1, 3, 5, 8 minutes, which is a long interview, by the way, with you. They'll remember you for that and continue to follow up with you for that. So don't plug your program and say the advantage of doing this program, not news. All right, number 3, talk in sound bites. And I alluded to this in the previous point. When you're giving an interview, remember it's a conversation, but you want to talk in sound bites and memorable ones that allow a pause. So if you say, yes, absolutely, and what I call that, or a great reminder tip that I give is, and something I would say would be intense early, light late. It's one of the mantras of Flipping 50. We have 10 tenets, all copyrighted, that fall under our umbrella of what it is you need if you're a midlife woman. So then we talk about that one and they will ask questions about it, but you give the memorable soundbite and then wait for the follow up. Now, they may let you talk, and that's okay, but give them the opportunity in the pause, the pregnant pause, to jump in with a question. Next up is answer thoroughly. Now, you may think I'm contradicting myself, but you do want to answer not with a yes or a no answer. So much better, right? If the answer is, well, it depends. What I mean by that is, and go on to explain, what is it that you mean? Or maybe the answer is yes, and why I'm giving you that answer is because it could also be a no if this X, Y, and Z. So answer thoroughly. Don't leave them hanging. Don't confuse. Next, tell stories. Use analogies. So if you can cause the listener to create an image in their mind, so they're actually picturing themselves. In fact, what it's called is allow a listener to put themselves in the story. So the story you might be telling is about an experience that happened to you. But instead, your listener, if you're doing a good job of targeting information that they want, they're putting themselves in that, imagining how that would feel or look to them. So think about stories that you can tell if you have, say, three takeaways. You've created short sound bites, then maybe I would give an example of what it means to interval early and light late, or to break that rule and what happened to a client who did it. Okay, next, you want to practice your tonality. So it's up, not down. And I have to practice this one quite a bit. In fact, if I played this back as I might be a speech coach, definitely I can think of a gentleman who was my coach for a very intense weekend. I'm sure I would get a failing grade on some of these. So, what often happens when we listen to ourselves is what we'll hear is we allow our voice to go down and to trail off. Think of, who is it? Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh. So his voice is not just slow, right? So exaggerated, but really it trails down, right? Low energy. There's no excitement about it. It goes down. Right? But what you want to do is, say things in an uptick, even your name, Deborah Atkinson, right? So, Deborah Atkinson, you want to kind of up because that kind of exudes energy. And it's like, oh my gosh, I want to hear. So, you don't want your voice to go into a high pitch. It's just at the end of a sentence, you want to make sure that it goes up like that, not down like that. So it takes practice, trust me. Here's what I used to do. My coach actually did it. Like he did it because he was frustrated with me and he left me a message and I held on to that. Actually, he took my phone and he recorded it in my recording so that I could play it over and over and over again. And then I would repeatedly record myself and listen to it. And I would go through a few sentences, but then I would find myself going, okay, down, because that was my natural tendency. So if you've been doing this for 40 years, you're not going to change overnight. So practice. That's how speakers get good. Now, I'll tell you this, when I gave my TEDx talk, those are between 15, well, depending on the TEDx, but it, less than 18 minutes long. And generally, when it's 18 minutes that you have on stage, or they're going to yank you off, you don't get to finish. They tell you, the organizers, to be done in 15 minutes because there's always that chance you're going to embellish when you're up there. You get nervous, you forget something, and then you'll kind of go off track and it won't work beautifully. So we try to give you the insurance, right, that will be finished. But when I was practicing my 15-minute talk, I did it over and over and over, and I would start in the middle and start at the end and start at the beginning, making sure that if I forgot a line or I got a little nervous, that I could start anytime and pick that back up. So the shorter it is, the more you want to practice because the more every single word counts. If you get interviewed and you have a minute, that answer you give every time should be succinct, impactful, make a difference, and have that person listening be glad they heard it. Okay? So the only way to do that is to practice that tonality. Okay? And it's be better than boring. Right. All right. You got the idea. It's hard, promise you that. Put authority in your voice. So here's the other one, and that may give you mixed signals. So my thought, and the reason I had such a problem adapting that tonality of the up and the down and ending sentences in an up, I felt like, and in fact, the way I was doing it did this, but I felt like it was just too soft and Barbie, like a valley girl. That's what it felt like to me. But that's really not what it's all about. And you can still put authority in your voice. How am I doing it for you right now? What I hope that you're hearing is I'm punctuating and I'm giving a little space between words. My voice is getting louder and stronger, and sometimes I talk just a little faster to get your attention. And then I'll leave that pregnant pause at the end of the sentence. That's authority. And you don't. Anybody who believes in what they're saying feels that they absolutely are right, speaks up, not down. So when I hired dozens of personal trainers, the ones that were red flags for me were the ones that when I was in the room, in the proximity of them as they worked with clients, I could barely hear talking because I knew they were self conscious. They weren't sure of themselves. And that made me wonder, if they were sure of the science of what it is that they were doing. And so your listener is thinking that too. You know how when you go to, say, a first graders or second or third graders play, and you're so nervous for them, right? Because it's the first time ever in their lives they've had to rehearse their lines and then get up and stare at an audience and repeat them. You don't want anyone who you want to believe you are the expert to have the idea that you don't know what you're talking about and you don't have confidence in what you're saying. So here's the thing: we don't know all the answers all the time. Confidently, you can say, truthfully, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out and I will get back to you so you can share that with your listeners. That's a much better answer than trying to play instant expert, which makes you uncomfortable as well as your interviewer. So there are ways around not knowing all the things ever, because we're not going to. Doesn't matter how old you are, how many years or decades you've been in the industry. That's just the way it is. We're not all experts in everything. All right, we're coming to the second half. You're getting there. Hang in there. Next is be clear. If you confuse, you lose. So it's better to probably share one small tip, one small point, and drive that home than to elaborate on a confusing, on a concept that is very important, but is what is the equivalent of university as opposed to talking at your fifth grade understanding level. And that's not to say that your listeners need it dumbed down, but they do need it simplified so that they can absorb it, because we have so much information coming at us all day, every day, that infobesity means if it's not memorable and remarkable, meaning they will remark on it again, it's probably just going to wash over them. So be clear, a short, easy answer. You can always elaborate if you're asked to. All right, we got 3 left. Hang in there. Make it easy for the interviewer. Provide the talking points. So you will provide that introduction. You will provide the bullet points, like these are the 3 takeaways. Give them some potential questions and let them know it's that. So potential questions that you could ask me, that is super helpful. So as a podcast interview host, I love it. And I ask when people want to be guests on my podcast and people apply to be guests, I ask for what are the 3 to 5 questions you want Deborah to ask you. Now, I don't always use those because no one who's just found me knows what have I talked about with this audience for 8 years, multiple podcasts every week. They don't know that. And so I have to screen and filter it for who I know is listening and make sure that it's correct and make sure that I phrase it in a way that my audience may know I know about this, but I'm asking for a second opinion here with this expert. So it stages well for both you as the interviewer or your interviewer, as in your case, and for you and for the audience. So you want to make it easy for the interviewer by providing the intro, providing the takeaways and the talking points or the questions that they may ask, and put in all the notes that you give them. And here's the link that you can send viewers to, because they will ask you for that kind of information. If you're going on TV locally, they'll say, where's the best place they can reach you? They will give you that press. All right, 2 to go. Are you ready? Ask questions and do research in advance. Make sure that you know before you get on who's the audience. Like, what percent of your audience is female and midlife, and what is, so they can tell you Who watches at noon? Who watches at, your early morning show? You want me to come on at 6 or 6:15? Who's your biggest viewer at that point? What segments have gotten you the greatest press or review? So you can dedicate topics, you can watch them and see what they did, the interviewees on those segments, so that you too can make it more relevant and a better experience for you and your interviewer. So, know who the audience is, know what the biggest problem or challenge of the audience is. And last but not least is be sure, again, using all of these points, you make it news. No one wants to hear that you're publishing a book. That's really not news. But if there is a brand new study coming out that is in the arena, the knowledge base of the book or of the program that you're offering, now you've created some way to make it relevant. Maybe seasonally, there's a tie in with what it is you're doing that it will be the afterthought. It will be, and right now, you're offering something that actually will help someone avoid this problem. Is that right? That's a logical question, and an interviewer would be glad to ask you that. But they don't want to lead with, you have a brand new program you're starting. What is it? That is not news, and it is very salesy, sleazy, and spammy feeling for you and for them and for the listeners who will tune out. You're not supposed to be an infomercial. You're supposed to be news. You're supposed to be giving generously to people who are first dating with you to decide if they want to take the next step. So remember, it's not your book, it's not your program, it's really not even your brand new building or your addition or the fact that you've hired new trainers. At this point, as I do this live, we're going to come real quickly into 2 years, 24 months since the pandemic began. And I'd have to say, for many of us, we're still in it. It's going like a roller coaster. It's going up, it's going down. And that is something to consider. So you can't just talk about immunity anymore. In April of 2020, that was news. That might have been something to consider, talking about exercise and immunity. But now it's different. You got to be better than that because that story has been done over and over again. But what is it that you could do? What news is coming out, maybe about exercise at home and what the status is? And how can you help give takeaways based on that? So here's the thing, you don't have to wait to be asked to apply all of these 10 points. You can create your own opportunities to give a great interview. You don't have to wait around. Call the local radio and TV stations. Let them know you've got tips on how to use exercise for boosting immunity, or something better, more newsworthy. Suggest 5 moves somebody can do at home for their core, their hips, their lower back, their stretches. The content you come up with is endless, right? There's no lack of ideas, but the key is you have to make it news, make it also entertaining. If any other fitness pro who could overcome stage fright could do it, it's not a good enough angle to uniquely highlight you. So, what is content that makes a great interview? Use brand new released studies or seasonal timely information. Think ahead. Sure, if you're listening right now, it may be January, but what's going to be the news next month? Heart health, right? Or if you're hearing this in October, maybe it's time to talk about holiday weight gain, tips to make those traditional meals healthier or avoid holiday weight gain. News stations already have today and tomorrow filled. They're looking for content that's maybe 3 or 4 weeks from now so that they can fill all those segments. They may have 2 or 3 shows a day. They've got a lot of time to fill. They've got minutes of segments. So if they're on for 30 minutes, that's a significant number of segments to fill. So help them out. Show them that consistently you can provide news and information in an entertaining way that their audience loves. And that, my friends, is how you can get more press and deliver a great interview when you do it that you feel good about. And that is press you can use over and over. I'm going to put a link in the show notes with other episodes that you might like. And this one is exactly how to write that bio, how to get anything but boring as you give someone your bio, your introduction. So, what are you waiting for? You can come and visit this show notes at fitnessmarketingmastery.com/great interview. And the world needs you and I more than ever. Let's make it a great new year.